I mean, one of the things that always comes to my mind when I see these kinds of web services, it's wonderful to have web services that can let you do things, but you think about the metadata, Wasabi aside, just in general, it's great to know, what's happening right now in the U.S. Northeast with respect to credit cards? Are people paying earlier, later? Are the balances higher? All that data sits on that kind of a service. Similarly, it sort of blows my mind that Yahoo Finance for years and years and years had this wonderful block in terms of owning the market with respect to financial portals, and yet there was no metadata. I never knew what anyone else was searching for. I never had any of this any sort of data about what was happening. And better yet, what are the people at Goldman Sachs searching for on Yahoo Finance? I'd really like to know that. And yet that metadata that these services make available, even in aggregate form, was never really shown. But this gets back to the question of communities and what we can learn from sort of these communities online. So I've got, next up we have George Tsiolis coming up to talk about the future of online financial discussions. Many of us have spent time hanging around in the wild, wild west of, come on up, George, hanging around in the wild, wild west of Yahoo news groups and places like that, just long enough to get absolutely terrified and leave again. And George has some provocative thoughts about the future of that kind of discussion. I believe so. So. Okay.
There we go. Thank you, Paul, very much. AGORACOM is a proud sponsor, a proud platinum sponsor of Money Tech. I want to thank all of you for attending this inaugural event. Before I get into the future of stock discussion forums, as a show of hands, how many of you actively participate today in stock discussion forums? Okay, so as expected, not very many. Let me take you, before I talk about the future of stock discussion forums, let me take you back to the past for a minute. There was a time back in the mid-90s when stock discussion forums were an incredible tool where people collaborated from all over North America, all over the world, got together to discuss the pros and cons of specific stock investments, all in the name of leading to making their best investment decision possible. It was an incredible tool, and when you want to talk about mining data, how about tracking the activities and the comments of a couple of million investors in one community? Nope. And then the late 90s came, and spammers and stock manipulators started creating chaos. They all found out that it became pretty easy to spam multi-level marketing sites, other stocks, use of profanity. Complete civility was lost, and unfortunately, we lost a fantastic tool. It's important to understand, before we get into the future of stock discussion forums, it's important to understand why we lost that great tool. The weakness in them, the flaw in them, is that they're primarily dependent on advertising and CPMs. As a result, a lot of these communities were willing to sacrifice quality for quantity in order to increase page views and, as a result, increase advertising revenue. Now, we all know now that that was a losing model. Why? Proof positive. It drove away good investors who just didn't have the time to stick around and try and separate the wheat from the chaff. So it became the status quo. We all said, well, the CPM model has been played out, and it all ended in chaos, and that's pretty much it for stock discussion forums. But in fact, it didn't have to be that way, and there's specific market reasons why it didn't have to be that way. First, outside of companies like Google and the top companies in the S&P, a lot of public companies were getting hurt by stock discussion forums. Again, misinformation, people basically taking over the message of public companies. So they were motivated to try and find a solution, or they're motivated to engage a solution. Investors are no different from people on Facebook, MySpace, and other communities. Investors want a community. But what they want is a civil community where they can exchange information that leads to the best investment decision possible. And whenever you have strong market forces like that, I'm a big believer, and we all know that the market, in fact, always corrects these inefficiencies. And that's what we did. At AGORACOM, what we said was, we know there is incredible value in bringing stock discussion forums back. But how do you do it? To do it, what we did was we had to tear apart the CPM advertising-based model. We completely tore it apart, and we came up with an ASP model, or what is commonly referred to now as a SaaS, software as a service model, where public companies would pay to have us host a community where they could amalgamate their investors in one location, communicate with them, field questions, provide answers, and just create an incredible communications tool. As a result, a more lucrative model means the ability to be able to actually monitor what goes on these stock discussion forums, drives quality way up. The guys who are interested in bashing and spamming and so on and so forth and hyping stocks, they get forced out, and what ends up happening is quality returns, and investors like you return. Now, am I just talking in theory here, or is this something that is actually playing out? So what I've put up for you briefly here is what I call our track record, because at the end of the day, I measure whether something's working by whether it's actually generating revenue and a profit, and those are numbers there. In 2003, we ended up with about $2.3 million in revenue and a profit of just under $500,000. In our current run rate, we've got 86 public company clients right now that are using this model, so relatively small from a nominal point of view, but relatively big when you consider that from a quality point of view, we're starting to destroy the status quo and bring quality back. And it's generating some pretty incredible revenue and profit for us, which means it's only accelerating our growth. Now, understanding full well that there's no way we're going to be able to sign 10, 15,000 public companies to this model, we also start incorporating some Web 2.0 tools in order to build that massive community around our SaaS model. Now, how do we do that? How do you build a massive community without suffering the flaws of first-generation stock discussion forums? How do you do that? How do you keep quality up and keep the trash out? Well, we incorporated two things. First, investor-generated content. We're relying on the members of our community to provide us with content. Two, we've incorporated a bit of a WIKI model, a reputation system, where each individual stock discussion forum, as voted on by their fellow investors and fellow colleagues and fellow members, have about 3 or 4 what we call leaders that float to the top. Well, each one of these leaders has the ability, right from the interface, to delete offending posts, and when someone continues to post an offending post, then to delete the member entirely from the database. And that's a far more effective way of monitoring quality, and it provides us with an incredible ability to scale without sacrificing quality. And again, success metrics on this model that we launched back on October 5th. As of right now, page use per month at about 10 million page use per month. We're tracking about 120,000 unique visitors. Total visits are about 500,000 or 600,000 visits a month. Average pages per visit, 15, just over 15. Average time per visit, just under 11 minutes. Right now, we're up to 450 of these free hubs that we're creating. And visits are coming from about 180 countries and territories around the world. And again, I provide you these metrics because it proves that, in fact, this model is working. There is a future for stock discussion forums. And when you bring in the context of why we're here at Money Tech, vitally important for data mining. Again, going back to my point at the beginning, imagine being able to mine the activities of a couple of million people, what they're saying, their sentiment, when they're saying it. Incredible data possibilities in addition to just great information and creating a great community. So that's it for my presentation. I had about 5 minutes up here today. We've got, looks like do we have a couple minutes for Q&A or leave it at that?
Actually running a little bit tight, so.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. I've met a few of you over at our booth, and I'm more than happy to meet more of you at our booth when we recess. Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, George.